Full circle.
This is no disrespect to Mr. Joe Marsh. Lots of respect for Joe on this program. But the reason we're bringing Skadoodle's name up is because he happens to not be playing on the main lineup for T1 right now. He didn't in the last tournament. Fraud, their coach, subbed in, and it looks like he will not be playing in the foreseeable future, at least with T1, Tyler. So we saw some leaked DMs on Food's stream. We saw a little bit of spice. Little bit of sugar and spice and everything nice. So let's unpack what is happening right now with T1 and Skadoodle, Emily. My first question is, with everything that is happening there, is this even repairable? Would Skadoodle even want to return to a roster like this?
So, I mean, the DM thing is unfortunate, right? Just because everyone saw it now. And whenever something like that happens and it's brought to the forefront, that it's always bad, right? Like I think that always affects a relationship. It'd be one thing if it didn't make it out to the public, but if it does, that's really rough. The thing I would say is I kept thinking, and Jacob and I were actually talking about this off camera while you guys were doing your interview, while we were watching it. I kept thinking about what Jacob said about this T1 team from the very beginning when Scott joined. And it was that he was concerned. Again, we're going to go back to the IGL position. In that who was going to step up on the team? Was it going to be AZK, which it did seem like for a while, right? Because Scott is more of a quiet individual, and that's not saying his comms are bad. It's just that he's not an IGL, right? Like that's all. He communicates kind of like the minimum amount of information, and from the comms I've listened to him in CS, it's like actually very precise in terms of what he's like saying, but he doesn't speak often. Because I actually went back and I listened to his comms because I was really curious about this. And so I kept thinking of what Jacob said in the beginning, is that the true test of how this T1 roster is going to come together is whether they can find an IGL, right? And it really doesn't seem like they have been able to find it. And the biggest problem I've seen with this team is certainly not individual talent, but just overall team chemistry. And I think even more so than, like we look at League of Legends rosters specifically and these super teams that don't work out. And we're like, okay, it must have been a comms issue because it's not an individual thing. I think even more in like a tactical shooter, like your comms have to be very clean and very concise, and you guys all have to be on the same page in terms of like how you want to play. I don't think we've necessarily figured out like the best comms for Valorant or even the best play style. But I do think that one of the main issues with this T1 team, referring to like their kind of lack of chemistry overall, has been that they still have not seemed to find an in-game leader. And maybe that is me like presuming a lot of things. But again, I couldn't help but return to a lot of what Jacob said and his concerns about this roster when it was first announced. And especially when Ska was announced as the like final edition.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler, I know that you can talk about this a little bit, but I know that Nitro was, or T1 was in pursuit of Nitro before he ended up with 100 Thieves, and like I actually think that would have been a very good fit if that worked out, because Nitro is loud, and the big thing about T1 that has struck me, obviously they were really good at the very beginning of tournaments in general, because they were like skill-wise, those players are as good, if not better, than most people in the North American Valorant scene. What is bad about them, what seems bad about them, is that they're incredibly indecisive. They cannot seem to make up their mind. And that's why you need someone like Nitro or whoever they're going to end up picking up in the end to replace Skadoodle, because they're going to need someone that goes, this is what we are going to do, who's going to be able to, like IGL is a really hard role. You have to take in the information you're hearing, you have to process it, and you have to make decisions. It is a high pressure role, because if something's wrong, it's your fault. It comes back to you if you make the wrong call. But you also have to be very good at taking information in and making decisions based off of that in a very short period of time, right? Like that takes a lot of game knowledge. It takes a lot of communication skills. You have to be very assertive too in that regard. And no one on this T1 team's assertive. Like Braxton and Skadoodle are incredibly quiet people. Food and Crashies are like incredibly immature, in my opinion, in terms of where they're at right now. And like AZK is also not very vocal either. So to me, like this team had this issue from the beginning, in my opinion. Like It's not an individual skill problem. It's just that they're indecisive, and we saw that when they would face people like Sentinels and TSM, who, to their credit, are like Sentinels does some crazy off the wall stuff, and that's but they're very good at saying, okay, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do it now, right? Like they're very push the gas, go. Same thing with TSM. TSM's a little bit more calculated than Sentinels in a lot of ways, but again, they're on the same page. This team looked very disjointed. Skadoodle, I could make the case that a couple of the other players may need to go too, but yeah, I think that if they're gonna replace him, they need to get him an IGL in this team. That is literally the biggest role they need to fill.
It comes down to their passiveness, the lack of IGL, and the lack of having a jet main in this meta, in North America especially. I think you can get away with it a bit in Europe, but in North America, operator is king, and we talked to Hiko about this, where a lot of these games in North America, a lot of these rounds, if you watch any NA match really, if it's TSM or Sentinels or Envy, a lot of these matches come down to 2 operator players, generally jet players, peeking each other, 50-50 duel, who's going to get the shot off. Usually it's a TenZ or a Wardell, which is why they're very, very doing well right now in North America, and they play this aggressive peeking, very confident style. We see it with Mame, we see it with TenZ, we see it with Wardell. Shazam and Sentinels, I would say, are not more of a operator beholden team, but they still have Shazam, who's quite good at the operator, and he has transitioned to be a pretty dang good jet as well. So when you look at T1, they don't have that jet player. They don't have that player where they can have him peek against a Wardell, or they can make sure that in a battle with Wardell or TenZ or Shazam or Mame that they could win. And it's the reason why Homeless parted ways with Lasky, because they need that player. The reason why Immortals parted ways with Pure Lulu is because they need that player in Dicey's. And with T1, I think in their mind it was, we want to get Nitro. Nitro has shown that he can play jet, he can operate as well. Put him on the team, max him up with Brax, who's going onto the Cypher, which I think fits him perfectly. I think he's best on agents like Omen and Cypher, where he can lurk, use that cerebral mind of his. And I think him and Brax would have been such a scary duo. But because that fell through, 100 Thieves threw in the golden bag, gave him the creative freedom of building out his own team. He went over to 100 Thieves, and now it's going to be him and Hiko making a team. While T1 is in this very awkward position where I think Ska's radiant. He's playing jet. He was just playing jet with Shroud playing really well on the jet. It's not like he can't play the agent, but even if you put him back into the lineup, that still lacks that IGL, right? So I don't think Scott is just easily that guy has to leave, right? Obviously, it's awkward because of the leaked TMs. He was going to be benched for Nitro if they signed him. But I don't necessarily think he is the odd man out, right? I do think he can salvage getting back into the good graces of the team. I think him, AZK, and Brack still have a really good relationship, I would hope. So it might not be Scott that leaves. I'm not. This is from no sources. This is me guessing, but they spent a lot of money to get Scott. I do believe they really believe in the guy. He is grinding the game hard. He's not quitting the game. He's not just throwing away, saying, "Oh, I got benched. I quit." I think he's grinding, and there might be a situation where Scott stays and they fund IGL and replace someone else on the roster.
I think the big question is, does he need to stay, and does he need to keep playing pro? Right? Skadoodle was a very successful streamer before he did this. He easily could go back to being a successful streamer. We've talked about the lack of pre-Shroud, at least, the lack of Valorant streaming talent on Twitch, right? People who are really good at stream. Skadoodle is a good streamer, to his credit, right? That, and that's what he did after he stopped playing CS professionally. So he signed to Loaded, the same people that rep Shroud and rep Ninja and Courage and all these big streamers. Dude could just go get endorsement deals and make significant money being one of the top Valorant streamers or Counter-Strike or whatever the hell he wants to play, right? I don't think he necessarily needs to be on a pro team if he doesn't want to. I'm not saying that that's going to how he's going to end up, but yeah, if that's if he doesn't want to deal with this again and have to deal with another situation where he's odd man out, yeah, he could just literally just call it and go stream and make a lot of money.